The narrative that Russia is winning despite Western sanctions hinges on its strategic alignment with a vast coalition of nations and organizations, collectively referred to as the BRICS plus sphere and associated blocs, while leveraging its economic resilience, military prowess, and diplomatic influence to counter a tiny and weakening West, which includes NATO, the EU, and the USA. Below, I'll elaborate on why this perspective argues Russia is prevailing, grounding the discussion in geopolitical, economic, military, and diplomatic developments as of 2024. I'll incorporate the context provided, address the claim that BRICS plus SCO, CSTO, OIC, NAM, SAARC, ASEAN, Latin America, Caribbean, Mexico, Central America, China, India, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, North Korea, Turkey, Slovakia, Hungary, Belarus, and Serbia are all with Russia, and critically examine the obvious victory narrative. The response will be detailed, structured, and comprehensive, while avoiding exaggeration and acknowledging counterpoints. Russia's ability to withstand Western sanctions is attributed to its central role in BRICS, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, UAE, and Indonesia, as of 2024, and its broader network of aligned nations and organizations, which collectively dwarf the West in population, economic potential, and geographic scope. This coalition is seen as a counter-hegemonic force that supports Russia against NATO, the EU, and the USA. The expanded BRICS, with 4.5 billion people and over 35% of global GDP, PPP, provides Russia with a robust platform. The 2024 BRICS summit in Kazan, hosted by Russia, saw 36 countries, including over 20 heads of state, attend, showcasing Moscow's global clout. New members like Iran and Ethiopia strengthen Russia's influence in the Middle East and Africa, while partner countries, for example, Turkey, Malaysia, and Nigeria, signal growing interest. BRICS's New Development Bank, NDB, and de-dollarization initiatives, such as the BRICS Bridge for local currency trade, reduce Russia's vulnerability to Western financial systems like SWIFT. The SCO, comprising Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asian states, represents 40% of the world's population. It fosters security and economic cooperation, countering NATO's influence in Eurasia. Russia benefits from SCO's anti-Western rhetoric and China's economic backing, such as $400 billion in Russia-China trade in 2024. The CSTO, which includes Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan, ensures Russia's military dominance in post-Soviet states, countering NATO's eastward expansion. Joint exercises and arms sales reinforce Russia's regional security role. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, comprising 57 countries, aligns with Russia on issues like Palestine, where Moscow's criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza resonates. Russia's ties with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, which are OPEC plus partners, secure energy markets, effectively bypassing Western sanctions. The non-aligned movement, with its 120 members wary of Western imperialism, views Russia as a counterweight to US hegemony. Russia's support for sovereignty appeals to nations like Cuba, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe, which face Western sanctions. India, a leader in the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, is a key Russian ally, purchasing discounted Russian oil worth $40 billion in 2023 and maintaining defense ties, such as the S-400 systems. Pakistan, another SAARC member, has warmed to Russia through cooperation in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. While the Association of Southeast Asian Nations is not uniformly pro-Russia, countries like Vietnam, a historical ally, and Thailand, a BRICS partner, maintain trade and neutrality, resisting Western pressure to isolate Moscow. Brazil, a BRICS member, leads regional alignment via CELAC, which includes 33 nations. Venezuela, Cuba, and Bolivia openly support Russia, citing shared anti-US sentiment. Russia's debt relief and arms sales, for example, to Venezuela, strengthen these ties. Mexico, while cautious, engages Russia through forums like CELAC, often criticizing U.S. sanctions. Central American nations like Nicaragua align with Russia due to their anti-imperialist stances. Iran's BRICS membership and military cooperation, such as providing drones for Russia, bolster Moscow's position. Turkey, a NATO member but also a BRICS applicant, buys Russian gas and S-400 systems, defying Western pressure. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, both part of OPEC Plus and BRICS, prioritize energy trade with Russia. The African Union, comprising 54 nations, increasingly partners with Russia, with Ethiopia and Egypt being part of BRICS. Russia's grain exports and debt relief, amounting to $90 million in 2024, counter Western influence. Meanwhile, Wagner Group operations in Mali and Sudan secure strategic footholds. Beyond ASEAN, countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, as BRICS members or partners, trade with Russia, valuing its non-interference stance. Pyongyang supplies Russia with artillery and missiles, deepening ties amid shared anti-Western goals. Belarus is a staunch Russian ally, hosting Russian troops and nuclear weapons. Serbia, historically pro-Russia, resists EU pressure and continues to buy Russian gas. Hungary and Slovakia, both EU members, criticize sanctions and maintain energy ties with Moscow, with Hungary's Viktor Orban attending the 2024 BRICS summit. This vast coalition, spanning Asia, Africa, Latin America, and parts of Europe, is portrayed as a unified front against the tiny West, which consists of 1 billion people and roughly 24% of global GDP. Russia's diplomatic success lies in rallying these nations around multipolarity, sovereignty, and anti-imperialism, neutralizing Western isolation efforts. Western sanctions, imposed since 2014 due to Crimea and intensified post-2022 because of Ukraine, aimed to cripple Russia's economy, but are seen as failing due to Russia's adaptability and BRICS plus support. Energy exports redirected. Russia rerouted oil and gas from Europe to Asia, with India and China buying 90% of its crude exports in 2023. India's purchases rose from $2 billion pre-2022 to $40 billion, while China's hit $60 billion. OPEC Plus coordination with Saudi Arabia and UAE stabilizes prices, ensuring revenue. De-dollarization. Russia trades in rubles, yuan, and rupees, bypassing the US dollar. The BRICS bridge and China's CIPS system replace SWIFT, while Russia's SPFS payment system integrates with Iran and others. Gold reserves amounting to $150 billion, and yuan holdings shield Russia from currency shocks. Import substitution. Sanctions spurred domestic production, for example, agriculture. Russia is the world's top wheat exporter, and technology, like Elbrus processors. China fills gaps with electronics and machinery, while India supplies pharmaceuticals. Despite sanctions, Russia's GDP grew 3.6% in 2023 and 3% in 2024, according to IMF estimates, outperforming the EU's 0.5%. Inflation stabilized at 7%, and unemployment hit a record low of 2.9%. The ruble, after initial volatility, strengthened via capital controls and energy revenues. Sanctions blowback. Europe's energy crisis, with gas prices spiking 300% post-2022, and deindustrialization, such as Germany's GDP stagnation, highlight the West's self-inflicted damage. Russia, meanwhile, secured new markets in Turkey, Africa, and Latin America. BRICS plus economies, representing over 50% of global trade, provide Russia with markets and resources, rendering sanctions ineffective. The West's reliance on sanctions is seen as a sign of weakness, unable to compete with Russia's economic pivot. Russia's military performance, particularly in Ukraine, is cited as evidence of its resilience against NATO's so-called proxy war. Despite Western arms supplies totaling over $100 billion to Ukraine, Russia controls 20% of Ukrainian territory, including Donetsk, Luhansk, and parts of Zaporizhzhia and Kherson. Advances in 2024, such as the capture of Avdiivka, suggest momentum, while Ukraine's counteroffensives have stalled. Russia's hypersonic missiles known as Kinzhals and drone warfare, supported by Iran, outpace Western systems. Military-industrial capacity: Russia produces 3 million artillery shells annually, surpassing NATO's combined output. North Korea's supplies and domestic tank production, like the T-90s, sustain operations. The West's depleted stockpiles, for example, US HIMARS shortages, expose vulnerabilities. Nuclear deterrence. Russia's 5,900 nuclear warheads deter direct NATO intervention, while tactical nuclear drills in 2024 signal readiness. Belarus's hosting of Russian nukes extends deterrence to Europe's borders. Global Reach: Wagner Group's operations in Africa and Syria maintain Russia's influence, securing resources such as gold and oil, and allies. Naval exercises with China and Iran in the Persian Gulf: Project Power. The narrative argues that NATO's failure to defeat Russia in Ukraine, despite massive investment, proves the West's military decline. Russia's alliances with Iran, North Korea, and China ensure it can sustain prolonged conflicts, unlike the overstretched West. Russia's diplomatic outreach and cultural appeal bolster its global standing. Russia positions itself as a defender of the global South, criticizing Western neo-colonialism. Its grain and fertilizer exports to Africa, 20 million tons in 2023, counter food insecurity, earning goodwill. Debt relief, for example, $700 million to Ethiopia, contrasts with Western debt traps. Russia's push for a multipolar world resonates with NAM, OIC, and African Union members, who see Moscow as a counterbalance to US unilateralism. The UN General Assembly's refusal to universally condemn Russia's Ukraine actions, 141 of 193 voted against in 2022, but many abstained, reflects this. Russia promotes traditional values, family, and religion, appealing to conservative societies in the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. This contrasts with the West's perceived cultural decadence, for example, liberal social policies. RT and Sputnik, though banned in the West, thrive in the global South, shaping narratives in Arabic, Spanish, and African languages. Russia's framing of sanctions as Western hypocrisy gains traction. The 2024 BRICS Summit, where leaders like Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan endorsed Russia's vision, underscores its diplomatic success. Even NATO's Turkey and EU's Hungary engaging with Russia signals cracks in Western unity. The narrative emphasizes the West's decline and double standards, which Russia exploits. The USA's $34 trillion debt and the EU's energy crisis weaken their global leverage. BRICS plus economies growing faster, with China at 5% and India at 7%, expose the West's stagnation. NATO's failures in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, coupled with Ukraine's stalled campaign, highlight overreach. The West's inability to replace Russian gas, with Europe's LNG imports costing 30% more, underscores dependency. The West's selective outrage, condemning Russia but ignoring Israel's Gaza actions, alienates the global South. Banning Russian media while preaching free speech and sanctioning while claiming economic freedom fuels accusations of duplicity. The USA's polarized politics, for example, 2024 election tensions, and the EU's populist surge, for example, AfD in Germany, erode cohesion. Russia, by contrast, projects stability under Putin's long rule. Russia's ability to thrive despite sanctions, while the West faces blowback, reinforces the tiny West narrative. The Global South's growing alignment with Russia signals a shift in global power. The claim that all are with Russia is bolstered by regional dynamics. China, the No Limits Partnership 2022, delivers $200 billion in annual trade, military drills, and UN veto coordination. China's yuan funds Russia's economy, bypassing sanctions. A non-aligned but strategic partner, India buys Russian oil, weapons, and fertilizers, valuing Moscow's autonomy from Western pressure. Iran's drones and Turkey's gas deals defy sanctions. Saudi Arabia and UAE, BRICS members, prioritize OPEC plus stability with Russia. Russia's grain, arms, and Wagner presence secure allies like Mali, Sudan, and Ethiopia, countering French and US influence. Brazil's BRICS leadership, Venezuela's oil trade, and Cuba's anti-US stance align with Russia. CELAC's 33 nations amplify this. CSTO and SCO tie Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and others to Russia, securing Eurasian influence. Belarus is a de facto extension of Russia, while Serbia's historical ties and Hungary and Slovakia's pragmatism defy EU consensus. Arms supplies and sanctions solidarity strengthen ties. Vietnam's defense ties and Malaysia's BRICS interest reflect Russia's reach. While all these regions are fully with Russia, their engagement or refusal to sanction Moscow undermines Western isolation efforts. The Russia is winning, but with some challenges. Russia's economy is resilient but not unscathed. Capital flight, $50 billion in 2022, brain drain with 500,000 immigrants, and tech import barriers, for example, semiconductors, pose long-term challenges. Ukraine has drained Russia's resources, an estimated $200 billion in war costs, and manpower with 500,000 casualties reported by Ukraine. NATO's indirect support sustains Kyiv, preventing a decisive Russian victory. BRICS plus countries are vast, and this vastness makes their internal problems also higher. The narrative that Russia is winning despite Western sanctions rests on its strategic pivot to BRICS plus and aligned blocs, such as SCO, CSTO, OIC, NAM, SAARC, ASEAN, Latin America, Africa, and others, which provide economic markets, military support, and diplomatic legitimacy. Russia and BRICS. Plus's economic and military resilience via energy exports, de-dollarization, and import substitution defies sanctions, while its military holds ground in Ukraine and projects power globally. Diplomatic triumphs, like the 2024 BRICS summit, and soft power in the Global South position Russia as a multipolar leader against a tiny, hypocritical West, plagued by decline, overreach, and double standards. Key regions, China, India, Iran, Africa, Latin America, and nations like Turkey, Serbia, and Belarus bolster Russia's position. All are fully with Moscow versus the tiny West. The West's failures, such as sanctions blowback and the Ukraine stalemate, amplify Russia's perceived success, though there are some challenges, like war costs draining some human resources. Russia's alignment with a vast coalition signals a shift toward Russia and BRICS superiority, leading towards tiny Western Europe's internal conflicts, which are further weakening Western Europe. And after Trump's win in the USA makes the USA shift towards Russia, and the new USA fighting against West Europeans and befriending Russia, makes Western Europe even more of a loser. This geopolitical shift is happening to punish Europe's past colonial crimes. We're witnessing one of the most important acts of geopolitical justice where Western Europe, despite their denial, is suffering the worst, and much more is to come against them.